All right, if you're joining us now, we are doing a pre-recorded show tonight. I'm Jesse with Brew Minds, and I am here with Luke and Bryant from Rhinegeist, and we're going to be talking all about something I've been very excited to hear about for the past few months, your guys' upcoming sour program. So I know you've been, it's kind of been shrouded in secret for a while now, so what can you briefly kind of tell me about what's going on with it?
We are, it's been a long time coming. I feel like we started the sour program somewhere around 6 weeks or a month or two into our existence as Rhinegeist. Luke has been on board since day one, or negative. His roasted coffee was bad before starting with us.
And you guys, you're going into your 5th year or exiting the 5th year? Like where are you at now?
We started in, opened up June 28th of 2013. So end of June this year will be our 5th year in business. The sour program started out as just one of those places where exploring the flavors of beer, it was kind of one of the final frontiers. We knew there was a lot untested. It's not systematic the way that brewing Saccharomyces-based beer is, where you brew wort, you hop it accordingly, and 2 weeks later it becomes a delicious beer, approximately what you hoped. It's a lot more of a conditional process based on how well do the microorganisms react together. And so we knew we would get into it, kind of dip our toe, and then scale it up only when we were comfortable with this is what we want to bring to the public.
And that's still accurate, as accurate now as it was 5 years ago. I feel like the Brett beers and the tart beers and the sour beers are still that final frontier of beer. Like there's so much room to do so many different things and different flavors that we haven't even tapped yet. It's really an exciting thing.
Yeah, as you guys were kind of getting us started, what were some of your favorite early successes? Because I still remember like Mushashu, and then did I pronounce that? Mushashu. And then I don't know, everybody like Peach Dodo Sleighs, around the town regionally. What were some of your guys' favorites as you were
in terms of sours?
In terms of sours.
Well, the classics set, when you talk about inspiration, having spent a lot of time in Northern California, Russian River makes amazing sours. The Rare Barrel, based out of the East Bay, also does. Quintessentially Rodenbach, and the lambics coming out of the Lambic region in Belgium are sort of the quintessentially classic examples. Cascade and the brewery also have great examples, but it's, we're approaching somewhere around 7,000 breweries in America, and most of them don't touch sours because the market is much smaller, they're very much tougher to make, they're less predictable, and the risk of infection of your fresh beer is really high and probably chases some people out. We're lucky enough to have been able to quarantine these to the basement, which is one little facet of this 130,000 square foot complex that we could put sour beer in there, let it mature, and learn from it over time.
So what have been some of the ones that you guys have produced that you most enjoyed from learning with and kind of growing the program?
On the sour side, so Sci-Fi is the original one. That's the classic. That one's been an awesome learning experience growing it up, throughout its life. We are on generation 7 of that yeast now. It started as 2 smack packs and a carboy, and that was in 2013. We served it at Beer Fest, took a gallon, inoculated a wine barrel, let that grow up, and just kept spreading that love throughout the cellar down there.
I remember when that beer came out, like you guys had texted me like, hey, we've got something cool, and we had to send out to get the beer, people had to have like a secret password and stuff. It was just so much fun.
Photon gyrator. gyrator. You had to come up to the booth and say photon gyrator.
Oh man, that year at Beer Fest, the van battery died, so I had to come back the next day and try and jump the thing, and there's a special trick on a sprinter that we didn't know yet because we were new at the sprinter game. But that was a fun one. That was we were talking about a scale between the quintessential classic producers, where the Cascade beers are some of the most tart out there. The brewery makes some really tart beers as well. They're like intensity of flavor 8, 9, 10. Whereas in the early days we were probably at that point approaching like 4, 5, 6. Like it's got enough funk and enough character to share with the world, but to take this to the next level, we wanted to wait for things to really be ready.
Sci-fi has been, and so from there where it's spread through the cellar, that's been sprinkled out here and there at small events rarely, and then our anniversary parties we've always brought it up for, but it's only a few casks, so maybe 4 or 5 casks were being blended together to bring up to it for a small run. But now we've got a reasonable amount of it in the bright tank currently that'll be bottled for later release.
I'm going to bring up some video here real quick just to kind of show people. They'll be able to see it on screen. We're kind of starting with like your yeast propagation, and we've actually got you like cutting apart the foeder. Like, when were you guys able to get the equipment and everything? What was it like bringing the foeder in and getting to unwrap all your new toys? Like,
oh, that was game changing. But there's a step in between us stepping up from doing things. There was that carboy, and we went from that into doing things a single barrel at a time, and we did a lot of experimentation. We probably tried 20 different yeasts, a whole cask at a time. In the fresh program, as I was dumping things, we would bring the casks down, fill them up with a base, generally Cougar actually, let the Brett eat it out and taste it, see if we liked it, what we liked or didn't like about it. What we liked, we stepped up into bigger 10-barrel batches. A lot of those are actually being bottled or put onto draft now. Those are starting to be processed through the system. But we did lock in on the yeast that we really liked and pulled those over into the foeders.
And before that was when we were basically producing enough beer to serve the market for the first 3.5 years of our existence, and moving from a point where, all right, we have a little bit extra that we can send to Luke, to building an intentional sour base, which we call Infinite Dawn, that goes and feeds the sour world, so that you're not left with bitterness that you don't want. Fiction in the early days, which was a base of science fiction, had hops because it was a Belgian extra pale ale, and we really enjoyed that beer. And then brought it up in the sour side, which is romantic, but we realized like that bitterness doesn't need to be in there. A lot of these traditional lambics use old aged hops, so we just lowered the bitterness, increased the mashing temperature, and ended up with more complex carbohydrates, which better feed the Brettanomyces, Lactobacillus, and Pediococcus, as opposed to finished beer that actually ends up being pretty dry. That's one of our signature perspectives on beer. Nice, dry, frisky, and drinkable. But so Infinite Dawn then started to feed the sour program with the predictable bugs. Whereas when we started out, I think we inoculated 6 or 12 different Brettanomyces strains and mixed culture blends from each of the different yeast purveyors, BSI, Omega Labs, White Labs, Y Yeast, and saw which ones expressed themselves the way that we wanted. And we also inoculated unintentionally a wild strand of Brett. That's our house Brett strain.
I was just going to ask, like, how much did the taking wild samples and stuff work into this? So were there any sort of curveballs that came at you while you were learning all this, or what? How did that all go down?
It was pretty smooth, actually. I mean, we just grabbed it downstairs by the elevator. It fermented out, and we really liked all the characteristics that were coming from it. It's a really fruity yeast. There's a lot of white grape and peach that it kind of kicks off. There's still some kegs bouncing around. We called it wild fiction. Fiction was also the base for that, but it was with that yeast, and it's very different than science fiction. After we got a hold of the yeast, we sent samples up to Omega. That's who I use probably 70% of the time for a lot of what I use, and we've got that banked up there with him, which is awesome.
Now we can get a snack pack of our own yeast that we discovered here at Rhinegeist.
That's great.
We've also done wild apples. So we've done kind of a beer mead cider blend where we use the yeast on the apple skins.
I've been doing a little reading about that. That sounds a lot like Spanish cider, that they do a lot of kind of wild fermentation. That's really cool.
or natural wine. Because there's plenty of yeast that lives on the skin of these grapes or apples or pears, what have you. So we just brought them in from a local guy down in Kentucky.
Yep. There was 250 pounds that we just macerated right into the Infinite Dawn base and let it spontaneously ferment, and it got I think that's the tartest beer that I've done so far. I mean, it really got down there, pretty low, pH wise, and very delicious. There's still a few kegs of that bouncing around, but I did take the culture and spread it around to a couple more 10-barrel batches just to keep it going. But it is a pretty wild, spontaneous one for sure.
Awesome. I have some questions about like your barrel usage and whatnot, but because you brought it up, I kind of want to bring up your Infinite Dawn label. I was looking at that. I really like how you guys kind of put this together, because something that's sometimes frustrates me about brewery and like their labeling and bottling is that the pictures are really nice, but there's not a lot of meat there to it. Like there's you want there to be kind of a mystery to it, but I mean, for a lot of this bigger beer nerds, we want a little more kind of knowledge. And I like the fans can see it right now, but I like how you kind of describe how people it's fruit character, it's funk character, and what people can kind of expect by that. But there was a line on it that's in the main part of the label that I was really interested in. Born from chaos, mastered by science. Like, what kind of spurred that, and also the name Infinite Dawn? Like, those were the two things that really kind of jumped out at me, like how the genesis for that creation.
I'll backtrack through a little bit of like, sours are sort of a counterpoint to our identity, and visually we wanted to speak to that. We do most of our graphic design in-house, and we wanted someone that looked at Rhinegeist as a brand in a brewery. We were 3.5 at this point, and said, all right, here's how they exist. This is this new space that feels a whole lot more like wine or cider, and is different and a counterpoint. So whereas we use darker tones, brighter colors, navy is our base color, we knew this was going to be lighter, brighter, and speak to where we have truth and cougar and saber-tooth tiger and panther and Andromeda and more tangible terms and personalities. We wanted to go more into the sort of psychological realm, because there's a clockwork and a regimen to making Saccharomyces-based fresh beers that is like conducting trains in a lot of ways. Like our master production spreadsheet looks a lot like a train schedule. And versus sours, where, I mean, we're 5 years in, we now have the confidence to know predictably this one takes 18 months or 24 months, and these are the brands that we wanted to create. So it was much more mystical, and it told us. We didn't know going into it, okay, we're going to make Infinite Dawn, and it's going to be ready. It had to tell us, and that learning curve was a little bit different than most of the other beer, because between Jim or the other brewers in the building, we have experience brewing, whether it be lagers or Belgian style beers, or darker beers. So shifting visually, we also wanted to speak to the beautiful building that we've got and connect the dots. So there's some arches on the label which speak to the taproom experience, and that iconic, amazing building that has skylights and it feels you're outside when you're just sitting inside is something that we really revere, and we're glad to work in natural light. And to put that on the label, it speaks to in the basement of that building. And this building is so much a part of what we love about this building is what we love about Cincinnati and its historic charm, and the intention and skill that went into building such amazing architecture and blossom brewing back before Prohibition. This building is a testament to. So weaving that into our modern label, we worked with a firm called OMFG out of Portland, Oregon, and they're coming from the West Coast. They see a whole lot of other brands that are relevant out there. So how do you look at us to kind of help us work on this? And then we were limited in terms of bottle size, because we felt like 500 milliliters was the right amount of size to either drink it yourself, if that's what you're looking to do, or split it with somebody. And you both get not quite 8 ounces of something that's really tart, really funky, and that's enough to enjoy and share. And we feel like bombers are a little bit too big and heavy-handed when you're talking about high levels of acidity.
Yeah.
And then we wanted to make a statement to make it accessible. You can't describe, we would need more label space and a lot more words to describe the difference in each of these beers. And we're talking more in inoculi and pH and how much time is it spent in barrels and is there fruit. And so it's a little bit more of almost like you would describe a wine versus the beers that we can tell you the hops in there, and it's a extra pale ale, and this is ABV and the IBUs, and you know enough to make a purchase.
It's kind of one and done, and then you can move on.
And we felt like that graphical explanation I'm a very visual person. If you can dumb it down to a spectrum, I'm on board, and then we can kind of bridge communication gaps. Right. So you may not have a language to understand the complexities, and I barely do, of Britannomyces and horse blanket versus Bardner and funk.
You're doing a lot better than most. You could almost teach a class.
But if you like funkiness, you can pick out something that's high on the funkometer, which is kind of what we've created there.
Also, I love how you guys have made so much use of this building, and how hard was it? Was there any concerns, speaking of the barrels and everything, keeping everything separated as you grew this program bigger and bigger, because there's more risks for kind of infection, and we'll touch on how much you guys have grown a little bit later in the show, but as your barrel program grows too, how was that different for your team, you and your team, to be able to kind of juggle a new difficulty?
Well, I kind of like what Bryant was talking about. So the sour room is literally in the very basement, very southern part of the building. It's very segregated from any of the fresh handling, normal processing equipment. I have fresh barrels that I store in the basement too. They're not immediately next to the sours. With our lab these days, we run a PCR machine, so we literally test every single barrel. So even though they might only be, 30 yards apart, we're testing every single barrel, and we're not coming up with contamination or infection issues.
And the PCR machine runs any molecular existence against a DNA checkup?
Yes, so it breaks it down into DNA, and it's got the thumbprint of beer spoilers, the DNA for that. So it'll tell you A, if it's there, and then B, what it is. We run that on every single barrel that's going to get mixed into a fresh bottle. Those all get ran on the PCR for sure. So, and we're having zero issues at all. So,
do you guys ever imagine yourselves as CSI Rhinegeist and have the little shows you put on?
I think Jim might fancy.
Those lab guys are cool, man. I was telling him earlier, my desk is actually in the lab. I work out of there. Jim was the original head brewer, and it's cool working next to him, and it's awesome. Some of the stuff they start talking about in the lab for sure.
We've been lucky. I mean, quality is one of those things where it's important for sours, but sours, they're infections, basically. If they're anywhere else in the brewery, they'd be a problem. So to know what's going on and the factors and the biology behind what's expressing these flavor characteristics is nice to know. But our ability to scale up and to throw this project on our docket is because Jim is so qualified, and he was our head brewer in the early days. He's still hands-on with any recipe and innovation that we do, but he's also now heading a team. He's our chief science officer and heading a quality control team that is sensory, education, brand, true to brand parameters. We have a trusted taster program that we've built out that many employees with the best palates are now drinking on a daily basis, beer before it leaves the building. And we've been able to not have any recalls because we catch stuff before it happens to go out into the market and decide if we'd rather dump a batch of beer, and that can be a 240 barrel, 3,000 case batch, that we're not going to put out on shelves because we recognize this is not going to help our brand move forward. And it's his stern, firm grasp of control and ability to say, hey, this isn't good enough, that we've always agreed to. I'm a sales guy that if we just needed to get volume out, I could trump that, but that's not how our power brokering process works. And it's enabled us to think about what to build the brand in the long term. And he's built a really cool quality culture where even the brewers that are going through the motions of brewing a ton of production beer, and you're creating work, the quality problems aren't necessarily their own. They're learning a lot about that process. And so our education in terms of how to deal with quality is blossomed over time.
I truly believe that's one of the next big steps for craft is that we might have, as you say, 7,000 or upwards of 7,000 plus breweries. For us not to have an issue like we did in the 90s, quality has got to be there. So it's really encouraging to hear, guys like you and other brewers taking that aspect seriously. Kind of transitioning out that, we were talking a little bit about like how in the funk realm, it's cool, it's okay to be a little bit infected. What barrels were you most excited to work with? What have you had the most fun with? Like, have you noticed that like kind of wine barrels give you some more of the characteristics or are fun to play with, or whiskey barrels or rye barrels, or what's kind of been the most fun as you've been learning?
Generally, when I'm dropping them down into that sour world, I'm trying to get, whatever it was as neutral as I can get it. I've used some fresh red wine barrels that have been, really delicious, but I'm really just using them as an organic fermentation vessel, mostly.
Which is way different than in the fresh world, where ink is going to pick up the character of the Heaven Hill or the Four Roses and the whiskey. We want that character to be a part of the beer. There's no room for bourbon and heavily oaked flavors, at least in the sours that we've created thus far.
Like I was saying, we try our best to neutralize them, but still you'll get a difference between a French oak wine barrel, ex-wine barrel, or a bourbon barrel, and ultimately I figured out I do prefer that old bourbon barrel kind of flavor. That char still just adds something to it, but they both are kind of interchangeable. What's pretty neat, and this will be in our Infinite Dawn when it comes out, the foeders, we're working with one of the U.S. manufacturers, I believe the only U.S. manufacturer actually, and their foeders are awesome, but they're brand new. There's this beautiful hint of oak in that beer. It's one of my favorite characteristics of it. That'll fade as we turn it over and over and over and over, but this is the third turn out of it, and it's just right there. It is a beautiful oak character.
Awesome. That is a great moment that we can pause for station identification. If you're just joining us, this is Brew Minds. I'm Jesse. I'm here with Luke and Bryant at Rhinegeist, and we're talking about their new sour program. And speaking of Infinite Dawn, we got a little sidetracked. We're going to bring it back here. What should people expect from this beer? Like, I've been curious. Like, whenever I try a new sour, like, is it going to be super fruity? Is it going to be tart? Is it going to be like super acidic? So, what can people expect?
I'll let Luke speak to the flavor profile. He's the expert there. But Infinite Dawn is the beginning of newness, and it was basically the name of what we started to create to feed our sour program when we knew this is what we want to inoculate as a fuel. So it's our base beer standalone, which is why we wanted to show it to the public and release it as a beer itself, because it's this spread that will feed many others that you'll become familiar with. So that Infinite Dawn is sort of this promise of a new beginning perpetually.
We have a 20 barrel and a 40 barrel feeder down there, both inoculated with this same thing. It's our house yeast, and then it's 2 different lacto blends that we have in there. Infinite Dawn's, just our blonde base we're bringing down, goes in, ferments with that yeast, that blend through our tanks, and it's getting this super beautiful white, great, perry, peachy characters from the yeast itself. It's a really fruity expression that I love. The acidity is not over the top. I mean, it's definitely acidic. We were at 3.7 pH is where it hit at on like 3.71, I think is exactly where it was at. So it tingles your tongue nice, but it's not overly tart. That's something else that'll progress. They'll get a little more tart as we keep going in and out of that foeder. The oak character is beautiful, and it is a great base on its own to drink and enjoy, or to do fruiting additions. Right on.
Nice. Well, as part of that, I think there is kind of a dichotomy, especially in the local scene. It drives me up a wall. Like, brewers having to choose, is this going to please the public, or is this going to please the beer nerds? Because the craft beer nerds are especially virulent, and I love how this plays into sours, in thinking that breweries are here to solely cater to them. When that's a small aspect of it, but it's not the full case. So as you kind of created this beer, do you think it's going to kind of split the difference? Will it kind of work for everyone, or which on the initial release did you kind of lean on?
I feel like Infinite Dawn is a very approachable, funky, tart, sour. It's not overly funky. It's fruity. It expresses very fruity, like I've been saying, and it's not overly tart. And that hint of oak really is a solid backbone. I think my mom would drink it. I think she'd be down. Which is cool. On the flip side, there will be a few brands that we are going to roll out that are probably more polarizing than that. But Infinite Dawn specifically, I think, is very approachable, and that'll work across the board. And beer nerds, I think, will geek out on the complexities. I think that your average beer drinker could find something to appreciate about it, and that's a beautiful thing.
We've the study that we've done with Great Beer Out There, which is the luxury of being a brewery in the 2000s alive and not a brewery in the 1400s or 1600s or making sour beer for a very long time, is just that there are certain flavor characteristics that have been expressed in American sour beer production that have no place in our glasses, and like baby diaper and vomit sometimes show themselves in this sour beer world, and then those just are not palatable for me to drink and for us to drink. And so the reason we've taken this time to progress into a place where we feel like our sours are something that I can convictingly say you'll find at least interesting, if not you might be off put by horse blanket or some funky characteristic, but not more so than you would an old world wine from Burgundy or
And if you're put off on that, then sour is probably kind of aren't your thing,
right
in the first place.
And one of the surprising attributes is Peach Dodo was one of our biggest seasonals last year in a 6-pack, and a delineation between our sour program as we treat it for outer reaches, and in Luke's roll down below, versus kettle sours, which are soured with lactobacillus and then basically pasteurized to then be fermented with Saccharomyces. So we create sourness, just lactose sourness, which is kind of light, bright, and tart. And we don't get any of the Brettanomyces funk. We don't get any of the deeper acetic comes from Pediococcus. So those we've been able to do in stainless up in the regular brewery.
Right.
And then we do what's called nuking the tank. And so we can scale those up into the seasonal 6-pack releases, which is different than the bugs that take hold, live in the wood, you can't get rid of, and would be a problem if we were to bring them into the other part of the brewery. So I think it's our success with kettle sours and tartness. We've got Maracuja, which was a passion fruit sour that we did, was beautiful and delicious. Pressed tart, collaboration with 16-bit. It was a Marionberry blueberry. That was this amazing color. We've actually recently put pressed tart on nitro, which is a direction that we may continue in, because
I would be interested to see how that plays out.
It's a beautiful visual experience, much like the cascade effect of a traditional nitro beer, like a Guinness or Murphy's, Beamish, what have you. And yet that purple color is incredible. And then it tones back a little bit of the acidity, gives you some body and mouthfeel. So that's a fun space. And then kettle sours in general and the traction we've gotten there. So that's where, if you're buying a 6-pack of something, I feel like you're bought into sours. Right. And that was something that we didn't have in our business plan to begin with. But we started to explore these flavors. Peach Dodo came out of experimentation. We all loved it, and then ran in that direction. And it's proven out.
Well, speaking of fruity stuff, do you have plans for fruited sours? Can we expect those fairly soon? And if you're willing to tease out any of those, and I'm also curious what sort of distribution we're going to see on this. Like, is it going to go Rhinegeist network wide, or is it going to be kind of a smaller imprint to start?
We've got a lot of fruit down there. It's already fermenting out. We do use a lot of fruit puree, a lot of Oregon fruit. I love that it comes in aseptic, so we can paint that flavor palette with our yeasts and whatnot. I like that controllability. Should I talk about what's down there cooking down? We've got
as much as you guys are willing to give. I don't want to.
We've got a nice cherry tart. We've got a nice cherry tart down there that's cooking down small batch. There's a nice passion fruit tart cooking down small batch. We've got a tangerine sour sop that we're going to throw in some more tangerine peel and just let it rock out. But that's right around the corner. We're going to go up. We've been working with a farm up in Michigan for a few years for a few different things, but we are interested in going up and getting probably 1,200 pounds of fresh cherries. You know, we'll get a real creek roll in here pretty soon.
So, and batch size, you asked about as well.
Yes.
So initially we're launching with the bare bones volume that we're able to. So we've got 8 to 10 barrel batch sizes this year that we now know what we want and are scaling up into somewhere around 400 or 500 barrels this year. So that will be available Rhinegeist network wide, but there's so little to go around. It's sort of an atomization technique.
So I guess the hidden question in there is, should people line up at the doors, or there's going to be a chance that if you can't make it, that you might be able to get your hands on it?
It's a balance. There'll be 60 cases. So we'll spread those around. We've done beer releases in the past, but I think it's most effective to get it out to the kind of nodes where our fans are.
Right.
And so we're going to release these to the Jungle Gyms and the Market Wines, and not all Krogers, but Krogers of the world, so that you'll have access to them.
I'm pretty sure my first beer release standing in the line experience was at Rhinegeist for Sabertooth Tire, like 4 years ago now.
I think I've got a picture.
That is so awesome, and that line was crazy too.
I remember showing up at Neon's when it still existed that night, and everybody was like grousing, like, "Oh, I got there, and couldn't get anything." I secretly had 2 like bottles like hidden away in my car. That was a heady day.
I was late to work. The first 2 releases of Sabertooth Tiger, and I'm not usually late to work, but yeah, it happens. It's got a big butt.
It absolutely does.
Again, if you're just joining us, we are Brew Minds, and I'm here with Luke and Bryant. We're talking about Rhinegeist's awesome new sour program. Tom would not let me get away with this without asking this question. Except for Peach Dodo, you guys have, or in some of your other sours, like you've had five or six previous sours now. A lot of what you guys have done has been very hop oriented. So, just how big of a driver was it to come to this world of sours? Like we kind of touched on that a little bit earlier, but has that been one of your guys' like top tier goals? That once you feel like you've got your core down, you're gonna branch into this world, or how big of a target was it for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, it's never going to be a game changer in terms of volume. It never was. It never will in the American beer market. I think with kettle sours and finding an approachability and watching the American, or at least the Cincinnati palate, move in a more embracing sour direction, we've been emboldened. It's a space where I feel lucky every day to work at and be a part of a brewery where I get to work with people that we kind of hand selected to help us do this thing that we call business and is a brewery, and we get to express ourselves in terms of the quality product that you have in your hands or drink out there in the market, and we have to stand behind because you drink a bad one, and shame on us. But if you continue to drink good ones, and we raise your eyebrows with more innovation coming, and you can count on us, and you want to show us to your friends, and you want to beer mule us back to other states, that's where this really cool momentum happens. And so sours is one of those like blue ocean strategies out there where there's not a whole lot to be mined from the space besides a respect for the tradition of age-old sour beer production, and it's a little bit more of an art than the science of the kind of beer scheduling that we do as a 86,000 barrel brewery approaching 100 this year, where it's a different level of complexity and learning that we've enjoyed. So it's that mystical space, and yet we're turning it into a methodological science that I'm excited about. So it was never like going to be a chief tenet. But hops are sort of like spice in beer.
Right.
1 out of 5 beers drunk that is craft, and maybe 1 out of 4 now, is an IPA. And so those flavors are what people are going to recognize. So it's kind of the currency of interest. And we've, in the early days, been going out to Yakima and Willamette Valley and seeing the growers growing the hops and understanding the complexities of that market, and it's something that's easy to convey and explain to someone. When you're drinking Galaxy and you get this ripe apricot peach character, you can really like that beer and understand why you might like this hop, and they only grow it in Australia, and all of a sudden you're connected to this terroir and space of ingredients. So hops are a very easy thing to convey. What makes it taste like that? Here's what it is and why. Simcoe, anything from cat pee to dankness to fresh cut marijuana, which
I can't begin to describe how jealous of you guys I am. Every time it's like September, October, and I see you guys flying out there, and everybody's like jumping in the hops and just like rubbing it together. I'm just like, because I used to live out there.
yeah, screws are ducking.
It just kills me because I'm sitting in my office and I'm seeing all the brewers fly out there. It's just, it's brutal, man.
Well, it's really funny. There's less than 200 breweries, and I'm rounding up from the 150 I've been told, out of 7,000 that go and hand select. And that's not because you can't as a small brewery. It's just, it was a priority from us from day one. So with sours, it was a priority for us to wait until they were good enough to make a point that we're at the echelon of those peers that we mentioned, rather than rush our way into it, because it's never going to be a volume mover. It's just more of like a
cool thing. It's totally for coolness factor, man, right? Like it's just so cool.
We get to make beer, and this is a beer that you like kind of roll the dice into the basement and hope what comes out is delicious. And we waited long enough where the dice rolled back, and we've got Infinite Dawn and Metaphysical Mango and more to come.
And this is after years of playing with yeast down there. I mean,
and a lot of bad batches. Gnarly tasting batches, and things that just weren't up to the snuff. So we cleared that out, killed those barrels. We're going to use those as decorative pieces. And then now fooders, which are these living organisms where the bugs live in these 20 and 40 barrel beautiful oaken vessels that were built in St. Louis, that are just a tribute to the way things like craftsmanship and function are in union, and that's how we can make these predictably.
And I was just going to say that's going to provide you guys so much stability to be able to reuse those. But I can't remember what the name of the. I'm just coming up with like yeast mother, but keeping that yeast propagating and growing that out well. But you touched on something I kind of want to transition into next. Is that so? This is year 5 now, and you guys have just exploded like. Continually one of the fastest growing breweries in the country. What's next? I mean, I know we just spent the past half hour talking about sour beer is next, but I think you guys are such an icon of the city now. Like when I travel outside of Cincinnati and talk to my beer friends all over, people are asking about like Rhinegeist and a couple other people, but like. You're known over in Boston. Anytime I go to Colorado, I'll see Rhinegeist on the shelves, at some local place. I'm like, how did you get here? So, where are you guys at now, and what's coming around the corner?
If there's beer in Colorado, it's because we send beer out to Denver ahead of Great American Beer Festival, which we go to every year.
Which is usually when I see it and everything, but it trips me out every time I see it.
But Colorado's a good starting point for describing our sort of penultimate plans, Colorado's not a state where we'll probably ever sell beer. There's such a great craft beer culture.
Right.
Beer is best drunk fresh. Our beer in faraway markets that have better alternatives, or equally alternatives that are more fresh in their backyard, is an equation that we don't win on. We are now 5 years in. We brewed 86,000 barrels last year, which was 60% growth. We did 56,000 last year, which is sizable amounts of growth that you don't feel the stretch marks and the growing pains and the difference in processes and the amount of communication that has to happen now that more people are involved with decisions or need to hear about decisions and downstream impacts of those decisions, and making sure that internally we're building a culture that is self-supportive and can grow in the long run. And then looking at a beer environment where there are 7,000 breweries. There are breweries in almost every neighborhood in Cincinnati.
Right.
I think last count was somewhere around, Kenny, I talked to this weekend because I was at Matt Tree for their 5th anniversary, and he said his count was 40, but I've heard 49.
Technically, we are at like 47, 48 right now. It depends on how you count certain operations that have two locations, but you're pretty much good to go with 45 to 50. Okay, we will be at 50 in the Cincinnati DMA by the end of the year.
Right. Blowing. And there were 13 when we opened up-ish. It's hard enough to keep track when it was a dirty dozen. But with that level of granularity, I love exploring new breweries. Everyone does. If they're quality and they're brewing really tasty beer, then people are going to win local appetites. And so that kind of dramatically shifts the market potential for a brewery to go national. And also going national, the ramifications of that mean you need to figure out 50 if you just want to roll up to a state. And we've been very successful taking a look at just Pittsburgh, now rolling out Pennsylvania as a state because there's millions, I don't even know how many millions of voters and people live there. But for a swing state like that, going to Pittsburgh and really winning on an account level so that we can be relevant and understand the complexities and what's working across other brands and growing one account at a time, one beer brand at a time. Where do we want to shift our focus? What do we want to lean into? And scaling that up is where our philosophy has always been. I grew up in New England, and it's an awesome beer market. Mm-hmm. And there was a moment in time where decision makers at our brewery thought that maybe we could scale up quicker than we could, and we basically agreed to roll out Massachusetts because it was a really tough market and we could test our brand power in a market that is 7 million people in the state with a network that had a lot of other competing brands to focus, and a market that was inventing arguably a new beer style, doing on style IPA, and fragmented amazingly and moving a lot of beer purchasing onto on-premise because brands like Trillium and Treehouse didn't sell beer anywhere else. It was just there. So to dip our toe into one of the toughest, most competitive, complex, dynamic markets in the country was a really great way and barometer for us to make decisions about where we could go from there. Mm-hmm. So 5 years in, we have nearing 300 employees. We have business units that range from running an event space and an annex and a rooftop deck to Rhinegeist, which is not just shipping our beer to our wholesalers nationally in 54-footers, but also bringing goods back occasionally when that sub-dropping makes sense, to focusing on the quality of our beer every day so the truth tastes the way that you expect it to, and it's shelf stable and growing in shelf stable ability over time, to picking the newest and greatest hops so that we have flavors that are compelling, to dabbling in hazy expressions and keeping seasonals relevant and always brewing less than you could sell so that you can move on to the next thing and have brand power later. And all of the things that we can control, I think we become really good at connecting a sales forecast to a production plan and connecting interdispersed departments, marketing, having a great and intimate understanding of how quality and brewing and events and customers experience the space, as opposed to a company that's grown in 4.5, 5 years to a bunch of people that are running in different directions and spending more time aligning to a focus to then grow further is a very different plan than, say, I spent 6 months at Golden Road where they were in global domination mode the whole way, and if you didn't survive, you just didn't cut it, and we were going to move on to replace you with somebody else, and that's not in our DNA.
I was going to say, something I've always been continually impressed by is every time I come in here, all the employees are very happy, and there's not a lot of breweries that can say that, or really companies overall. But I've been impressed by how much you guys have grown, but also maintained that core commitment to a singular identity, and also you're keeping your employees pleased. I've never heard a Rhinegeist employee bitch about anything, and that is truly.
Bob and Bryant are amazing. They take care of everybody really well. They care about everybody. I mean, as much as they did back when there was 10 of us working here, you know, and it's hard to be in touch with 300 people. I can only imagine, but I mean, they really appreciate us and express that in a lot of different ways. And I love working for these guys. People are happy. The whole atmosphere just people come to work happy. You know, they get out of bed and are excited to be part of this. This is an amazing thing. It's not taken for granted, and we all really appreciate working for these guys. We appreciate what they do for us. It's amazing. I don't know how else to say it.
I mean, who wouldn't? You get to play with barrels all day long. That made me happy.
I mean, well, that comes back around full circle. I mean, like we were talking about, really, I mean, it's just a coolness thing, you know, working down there, and that's my full-time job, is just to do cool stuff. Literally, that's awesome.
Well, speaking of cool stuff, I have one last question before we recap. I have to ask this. It like propagates on Reddit usually like every few months. There are rumors flying around that Rhinegeist already has plans and is contacting the city to create either an incline or a kind of a tram, an elevated tram from here to a park up the hill. Now, I just laugh out loud every time I hear about this. But you guys have also resurrected like an 1800s, you know, building and now like almost full use of it. You have a French-inspired restaurant, you know, that down here. Like anything is possible in the Rhinegeist world. So I have to ask: can we expect like Tramgeist, or are we gonna? Is it gonna connect with the streetcar?
You know, we're pretty close with a lot of people in the neighborhood. The Mohawk, the Brew district, and then the Mohawk district, which goes up the hill a little bit. I think everyone is rooting for some sort of solution. The streetcar and everything the city went through to get this streetcar to operational to the point where it's in now, where if you had an opinion on the streetcar before it got going, you probably have the same opinion now.
Right.
And my dad is a tour guide at the brewery and rides the streetcar to work, and so it functions for certain people, and it's busy as heck at certain times. So I think there's a romantic inclination to think that could work. I don't know where that rumor came from, but it sounds like a great idea.
So we should not wait on bated breath for Rhinegeist bar top connection to.
No holding your breath. The quicker solution would be to take one of those cheap Frontier flights out to Colorado and ride up a gondola to top of Breckenridge or your mountain of choice.
Awesome. All right. Well, we've been going for almost an hour now, so I think it's time you guys can kind of quick recap. When can people expect to get their sours? What can we expect to come out to the market? Kind of here in the bits, and then any other juicy bits you want to leave people hanging with.
The doors are about to open, which is cool. I mean, we've been building up to this, and it's about to happen.
Yeah, we'll launch these in late March. They'll be bottle conditioned, ready to go. We're going to go with Infinite Dawn.
Infinite Dawn will be first, for sure.
To roll with, and Metaphysical Mango shortly behind that. And like I said, the first batches of these, and our aim is to hold a little bit back. I have a little library in the basement where we can then evaluate beers as they age over time, and one batch to the next is kind of fun to do in vertical lingo. So late March, we'll have a few brands. We probably have somewhere between 4 and 10 releases this year. We also do, which we didn't touch on, but a grisette that is funky and
I love
batch processed for Sartre, and we don't even serve it up in the tap room, and they go through it at a pretty great clip. But that was one of the first sours that is just for Tannomyces and nice and funky, and yet is really approachable and great with all the existential food that they've got rolling down there.
I need some of that in my life. I love a good grisette, and they are just impossible to find. Coming, making a little bit of a comeback.
I think people are drinking equal amounts of flavor, lower ABV, as they live more responsible lives, and we get healthier with exercise, and you plan for the next day and whatnot. So I think we're headed in a sessionable direction.
Side Projects Grisette was really phenomenal, as was Jackie O's L. Both of those are just right on. They were inspiring. They were inspiring beers for sure.
Awesome. Well, Luke, Bryant, thank you for taking the time to tell us about the program. We'll be super psyched to see it on shelves, and as soon as it comes out, we'll tell the world, and hopefully we'll come back and get to try a few. But thank you for chiming in, and I'll be excited to have a beer with you guys here after the show.
Great talking to you, Jesse.
And for everyone at home, thank you for chiming in. We're working on the technical stuff, and we'll make sure that we'll be live next time. But until then, cheers.